Welcome to the 20th Doc Aviv Film Festival. My name is Yuval Saar. I'm the editor-in-chief of Portfolio Magazine, and we are honored to have here Jack Hazan, the filmmaker of A Bigger Splash, with us today. The film was digitally restored last year, and we are pleased to screen the new restoration here in the festival. This webinar will last approximately 30 minutes, and we invite you, you're more than welcome to leave your question in the Q&A section here at Zoom at any time, and we'll see the question and we'll send it to Jack. So hi Jack, how are you? You're in London now, right?
Yes, apparently you're here as well, I didn't realize.
Yeah, I'm also in London, although I'm going to be back in Tel Aviv in 2 weeks.
Okay.
What's interesting me in the film is, of course, how it was made in the 70s and how did you know David Hockney and how all these things came to life. And 30 or 35, 40 years later, what do you think the time has done to this film? How do you see it in these days? But let's start with, how did you get to know Hockney and convince him to make a movie?
Yeah, well, it's actually, I started 50 years ago. I approached him 50 years ago because my working partner, David Mingay, the editor, suggested, after he cut a film of mine, he edited a film of mine on an artist, he obviously noticed that there was a lot of acting from the particular artist. I demanded a bit of acting from the artist. It wasn't just a straight documentary. So he showed me this book, this brochure of a retrospective that David Hockney had at the Whitechapel Gallery in London. And I was immediately attracted to it because there was this hyper-realistic representations of his friends, figurative paintings where they were double portraits, in fact. And I thought, my God, I think I can do something with that. So I chased the exhibition and I caught up with him in Rotterdam. And I took a camera, took some shots of some of the paintings, came back, had a look, and then I contacted David Hockney and invited him to come and see some of the films I made. Well, there weren't that many. And he came along, had a look, came out and said, Jack, I'm not going to act. So he immediately realized what was required of him, not just a straight representation in a straight documentary. Well, a lot of phone calls followed to him. And it was quite frustrating for me because I never knew whether we could get this off the ground. But after, I think it was about 3 or 4 months, 1971, I think it was, that he invited me up to his studio. And I managed to bring a camera and some lights. And I did some shots of him working in the studio, working very fast. I didn't disturb him at all. And that was the beginning.
And what did you have in mind? Because I have to tell you, when I've seen this movie for the first time this week, I didn't know what to expect. And when I saw it, I understand really that it's not as you said, it's not a regular documentary film. It's an art film, and it was quite, I'm thinking about the early 70s. Script, did you know what's going to be in the next week, during all this production? Did you have a deadline?
Yeah, I never knew. I never knew what we were going to end up with. I had a partnership of fellow film technicians, which I deliberately chose to be in the various departments: editing, sound, camera. I was a cameraman myself, so I knew I I could depend on all these people to take part to be active. I always wanted to make a feature film, but I could never gain access to the feature film industry then. It was very highly unionized, even though I was in the union. They wouldn't accept me in the feature film. Each of the different departments were very, very insulated from each other. But the intention was to make a feature film, or certainly a feature-length film, but we didn't have the money for actors, so that was it. That was a starting point. Getting somebody who was attractive, an artist, and possibly he could perform something of his life. I had no idea what the conflict was going to be. No idea at all. But after I went round there a second or third time I think it was, I was there with David, about to take some shots of him, and he said, "Would you like to have Peter Schlesinger, his brother, in shot?" I said, "My God, yes, I would." So he called him up. He said, I need to do a little portrait of him in watercolor." And then he put the phone down. What I didn't realize was that he wants to see Peter, who was just living up the street. He'd got him a little flat, a little apartment down the street, so he could live on his own, because they had been alienated for some while. Peter had moved away from him. And so David just wants to have him in the studio. So when Peter arrived in the studio, he was shocked to see me there. And I thought he was going to walk out, but he didn't. And so there's this amazing sequence where David is painting Peter. And I'm there on my own, having set up the lights, working very, very rapidly and very quietly with this 35mm camera, which isn't particularly light. We took the sequence back to the, got it processed, took it back to the cutting room, and David Mingay, my partner and the editor, said, "There's the story." And I said, "Oh God." He said, "Yes, it's the conflict between David and Peter. David's left him, Peter's left David, and what's the consequence?" Yes. I said, "Oh God, this is too intrusive, I can't do it." So we argued over this for the next month or so. And in the end, I came round to it. I said, "Okay, let's do it."
And how did you get to, I don't know if you had to convince them, but it has a lot of intimacy in the film, a lot of nude, sex scenes. It's not like all the movies about sex or intimacy, but I just was born in 1973, so I didn't live in the 70s. But how did you get to have the confidence and convince them to be part of this very intimacy scenes?
I don't know. Well, it's just, I made many visits to David's place, David's studio, when he would let me. It's just, I became very friendly in a way. I wasn't part of their coterie, their set, but they accepted me. I wasn't a threat. I was just taking individual shots which had no meaning. Do you understand? They didn't mean anything because nobody knew I was shooting backwards and forwards, you know, in no particular way. There's no time, no dramatic time in it. There's no time continuum. So nobody knew what I was doing. But of course, I knew what I was doing. And David Mingay, my partner, knew what I was doing. Not totally, but it developed incrementally and very slowly after the initial discovery that this is what the conflict should be.
Yes.
So nobody really knew, and so nobody was threatened, and I would just come around with this clumsy camera. Here it is.
Really? That's a camera?
Yeah, that's a Camiflex, which I bought for next to nothing. So they weren't threatened by it. when you turn the motor on, it's like a machine gun. It's like a joke.
Yes.
But it's not a joke, and it has wonderful lenses on the front. So, and it's 35 mm studio quality.
Yeah. Yes. And so I was thinking, when would the shower scene would be taken? Question from the audience, and here it is. We have a question from our audience, from someone who really enjoyed the film and wanted to know, how was Cockney during filming? Was it as it is with doing the nude shower scene? And also, how much input did he was giving you during filming? Did you have artistic freedom?
The only thing David Cockney wants to do, and has ever wants to do during his working life and before, is to paint. He's not really interested in anything. Well, he is interested in other things, but that's what motivates him and did motivate him. So as long as I allowed him to paint, he wasn't bothered with me. So in between painting, I'd say, David, could you walk over there? Could you do this? Would you walk over there? Take your trousers off, take your pants off, and walk into the shower. Yeah, okay. So that's what he did. And he said to me, well, I'm coming in the shower with you. He said, Jack, you're mad. So I got in the shower with him, and that was it. I mean, he's not prudish. He's not puritanical in any way. So he wasn't bothered if I shot him without any clothes on. Just as like if you want to shoot shots of me without any clothes on, it wouldn't bother me. So, but he became very comfortable with me.
Yes. So you had completely total artistic freedom?
Well, why not? I mean, they don't know what I'm shooting. I'm just shooting shots of David one day. The next day I'm shooting somebody else. David painting, David going somewhere, calling round somewhere, ringing the bell at Celia's place. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what it means, what the meaning is. Nobody could ever know what the meaning was until it was actually put together.
All right. So, you know, during the film, I wasn't always sure what was real or what was really happening, what is part of the fantasy of, I don't know, of you, of the audience. And we have also a question from the audience, whether David was aware of the fantasy things that were gonna happen in the film, and what did he think about them later after he saw the whole film?
Oh, he didn't know anything. He really had absolutely no concept of what I was doing whatsoever during the filming. What's real? Some of the stuff that I shot, they said to me, you know, when I was shooting something and asking, particularly at Celia's, where Peter is with Celia and she doesn't open the door. That actually happened, but I didn't know that at the time. So really, I got so into them, so understanding of them, that I could actually plan scenes, and they didn't even know it. They actually were reflected. They had happened beforehand. I never knew. What I would do is I'd write scenes the night before. I'd write dialogue the night before, maybe 2 or 3. I would ask them to ask 2 or 3 questions, which were very pointed, relevant questions. And I couldn't handle more than 2 questions because I'm writing, I'm operating the camera. I just didn't have I just couldn't technically do more than that. But if you're asking what happened at the end, I said to David, he said he wants to see the film. I said, you've got to see it. And he was very relaxed about it. I said, David, don't be so relaxed. You know, it might upset you. Oh, no, Jack, don't worry. He came out absolutely white. And he said to me, it's too heavy, Jack, it's too heavy. And then he walked away. Nobody heard from him for 3 weeks. He just disappeared. And then he got his friends in to see the movie. And they all said, oh, I showed it to Ozzy Clark. And Ozzy said to me at the end, Ozzy was very cynical and whatever. He came out and said, Jack, this film is truer than the truth. which was an amazing thing to say.
Really?
Then he brought this lady over from Paris, Shirley Goldfarb, who he had painted in a double portrait with her husband. And Shirley Goldfarb came out. She said, "This is the greatest art film that's ever been made," she said to David. So, and then Henry Gelthaler came to see it. He acquiesced. He said it's a wonderful film. So there I was. So David had to accept it.
But I've read that he offered you £20,000.
Not directly. He didn't directly offer me, but from a roundabout way, I was certainly offered £20,000 just to throw the film away.
So I'm happy you declined the offer.
Pardon?
Because we get to see the movie. I've read also that when it went to New York, the custom official described it as disgusting and immoral because of all the gay scenes, and it was early 70s. And what can you say about how the public audience accepted it back then?
Well, how they accepted it as a film is one thing. How they accepted the gayness in the movie is another thing. I don't really think. Well, there was a public problem with the gay life. I mean, it just wasn't acceptable in those days. It was, it was not looked on very well, the gay life. It was a rebellion, really. It was, but that's something else. Of course, when it goes to New York, the gays would accept it. There's no doubt. It's like one of the gay capitals of the world at that time. But they hated the movie, everybody. And they gave it very bad reviews. I had about 10, 12 interviews lined up in New York when the film went there at the festival. And they all walked away in the end. And I only had one interview with a gay video channel. That was the only interview I ever did. So I was very disappointed. But when we went back there last year, and with the restored movie, it was completely accepted. More than that, they said, "This is a masterpiece." Well, why didn't they say that 50 years before?
Yes, yeah. So, except the gay thing, a few years ago, the piece by David Hockney, Portrait of an Artist, a pool with two figures, was sold for $90 million in an auction. It made David to the live artist that his art was the highest. Did you think 50 years ago that he's going to be a star, that he's going to set records, or he was just another nice, young British artist that you happened to make a film about?
Well, the most extraordinary thing is that the centerpiece of the movie revolves around the painting that 50 years later was sold for $90 million. Yes. That's just, staggering. Of course I didn't see that. I knew that David was going to be huge and expensive in time to come, but the only thing that was so extraordinary was that particular film, that particular painting, which was the center of the movie, was the most expensive modern painting that has ever been. I mean, it was extraordinary. I never could forecast that.
Yeah. For me, I told you before, I'm a huge fan of Hockney's work. I've managed to see before lockdown this year 2 exhibitions of him, one for early works and one drawing live at the National Portrait Gallery. I've seen his retrospective at the Tate a few years ago. And I wonder, in your perspective, 50 years later, what can we learn about Hockney's early years from this film? How do you see this film now? after so long, did you think that maybe you should have done things different, showed in other parts of film? I don't know.
I think it's a complete film. We worked on it virtually every day for 3 years. If I wasn't around, David was cutting it, David Minge was cutting it. We were constantly talking. We must have run through the various scenes thousands of times. And it's a very filmic film. It's not, it uses all the grammar of film to great effect. All the grammar that was available, we used, and I was young at the time, but going through it now, I'm quite amazed by, I didn't know I knew so much. So it's very satisfying to watch it now. I can watch it over and over and think, oh my God, that's extraordinary. So I'm surprised by it still. It never ceases to give something, and to people who watch it, get something out of it each time. Because it's not just a story. It's not just a documentary. It's got so many different levels, and they are intended. They are intentional.
Yeah, I'm curious, what was left out of the movie that you shot and you didn't put in the final version?
Can you say that again? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I'm curious, what was left out of the final version that you shot, but you didn't include in the movie?
Okay. One scene we did, we went round to some collector in a rainstorm, and we went round there. It was we shot about 6 or 7 minutes of Mo McDermott going round with one of his cut-out trees, which was very funny. And going into her house, and she had an indoor swimming pool, but she didn't want us to use that in the movie. That's the only thing we didn't use. The rest, we used virtually everything. The shooting ratio, what we used to what we threw away, was only 2.5 times to 1. So we threw away 2.5 times the footage that we actually used, which is incredibly low. But then we didn't have any money. So, and also I couldn't lean on the people to give me more time, because it was one shot or forget it, one take. So no money, and the people, not disturbing the people meant we couldn't shoot very much footage, and we didn't.
So in this new digitally restored version, like, what was into the process? What's the difference if I would see the previous version and the recently digitally restored?
What I was able to do, the restored version is like directly from the original negative, and all the prints over the last 30, 40 years have been from an internegative, which is not very good. There's lots of grain. So there's less grain now. And also in this particular version, we managed to take away a lot of the camera faults. I wasn't sure how to use this particular camera that I showed you. And we did have a filter was on the front of the camera. It was just in front of the lens. And any dirt on it or whatever would show up. And that's in the movie. And I did manage to remove most of the dirt, little curly hairs, which really irritated me. People never mentioned it. They were very, very, very discreet. They never said, "Oh Christ, what's that funny looking mark on the film?" They just were quiet. But now I've managed to remove most of the dirt and and also there was a lot of damage, film handling, and little spots here and there. We've removed most of those, thank God. And also I have to admit that I did an edit. I managed to flip something. I flipped one of the scenes. So it's the other way around, because I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but the shot, was in the wrong, screen direction was incorrect. So I managed to change it thanks to Mark. He said, well, I can do that. I watched this scene and something was happening and that wasn't quite right. I said, it's going the wrong way. So he said, okay, I can do that. He flipped it. I've never told anybody that before.
Oh, nice. We have another question for the audience. Back while doing the film, what was your perspective on the reflection of art in cinema, and how did you see the relation between the camera and the painting?
So how do I see the, can you put that another way? You were asking me what the camera in relation to painting? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's your perspective of how art reflects in cinema, and how do you see the relation between the camera and the painting?
Well, this film is a synthesis. It's of film and painting. It shows the best. It shows painting in the best light. It shows it's a fusion of filmmaking and the best in art. I mean, it's just a fusion of the two. That's how I see it. That's how other people see it as well, from what I've been told. It's just, it treats art with respect. It shows how art is being, I won't say constructed, but created. And it has the best of cinema. So it's just it's cinema, as I said before, with all the grammar being used to huge effect. There's overlaps in documents you don't get overlaps. In other words, I made people do the same thing from a different vantage point of the camera. You don't get that in doc. So it's not strictly a documentary. There's a lot of artifice in it.
Yeah. So maybe last question before we have to end. How did you decide when to stop filming, and you knew that you have it and this is it?
Yes.
Was it
exactly
budget or artistic restriction?
Yeah, I knew when to stop because, of course, towards the end of the filming process, I knew what the story was. So the last of the filming was with Celia Birtwell. I wanted to go to David's studio and look up with tears in her eyes. Of course, the tears are artificial. And that was the end of the filming. I knew that was the end. But it took me 2 years to get to do that shot. She was so difficult. I mean, she was having health problems or whatever. So 2 years or a year and a half before I asked to do that shot, then I knew it was the end.
And did you ever sort of making, I wouldn't say a sequel, but I don't know, after 20 years or 40 years or 30 years, do something in retrospective, or this is it and you're over with it?
Sorry, say that again. Can you answer that question?
Ever sort of making a sequel or continue? Yeah.
No, for me, that's art. I would never touch it again. Just like I did Rude Boy, and I would never touch music again. Also, I thought, of Bigger Splash, that's the end of documentaries. There will never be another straight documentary after this. That was my belief. Of course, I was totally wrong. People carried on in the old way. I thought this would be the end. It's like James Joyce, writes Ulysses and that, or Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah.
No, this isn't Finnegan's Wake. This is Ulysses. And that's the end of the novel.
Yeah. So in this optimistic word, we're going to end this webinar. I want to thank you very much for joining us and telling us behind the scenes of this movie. And I urge the audience to go watch the film here in Dockerville Festival. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.